Uh, Thank you all for joining us for this domestic violence in children training today. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here for this Pinellas Continuum of Care training hosted by our friends and partners over at CASA. And we have with us once again Ellen Williams with CASA, who is going to lead this training. And Ellen, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for being here. I don't know how many of you have been on one of my presentations before, but I'm thrilled to be here again. Today we're talking about a pretty touchy subject, domestic violence in children. Um, as Victoria said, I am Ellen Williams. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for CASA. For those of you that don't know, I'm sure you do, but for those of you that don't, CASA stands for Community Action Stops Abuse. We are a certified center here in Pinellas County for survivors of domestic violence. Um, Basically, our goals today is we're going to do just a little bit of information about DV, just kind of a refresher so we're clear as what domestic violence is and how it affects survivors. But then the main goal is to talk about how domestic violence actually affects children. There is quite a bit of triggering content in this presentation. We are all about self-care. And so if at any time anything makes you uncomfortable, I welcome you, encourage you to get up, walk away, turn off the computer, whatever it is you need to do to take care of you. There's a lot of information to go through, so I want to ask if you would hold questions till the end of the presentation. I will have a Q&A, or if you want to put them in chat, I can go back and answer them also as well, but just wanted to try to get through everything as quickly as I can. So to get started, I always start presentations with the legal definition of domestic violence. And the reason why is because this is what can be very confusing to the community. This is the Florida statute of domestic violence. This is what law enforcement says it is. It's what our legal system says it is. And the reason why it really only includes the physical, as you can see, any assault, battery, assault, sexual battery, stalking, aggravated stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, or any criminal offense resulting in physical injury or death of one family or household member is because this is what is easiest to prove. So this is what our legal system and our law enforcement recognizes. However, the social definition covers not only physical, but also sexual, emotional, economical. This is what's recognized by the United Nations. This is what is recognized by the justice system. This is what Justice Department, sorry, this is basically any type of pattern or abusive behavior in a relationship that's used to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. This can include intimidation, manipulation, humiliating someone, terrorizing someone, basically any kind of, like I said, power and control over from one intimate partner to another. Quickly, just a reminder, the US stats say that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner. And 1 in 10 teens report experiencing physical violence from a partner in the past year alone. There's 67 counties in the state of Florida, and Pinellas County ranks 5th in the most reported domestic violence incidences. In Pinellas County, domestic violence happens more than aggravated assault, vehicle theft, robbery, rape, and murder combined. There were 6,111 domestic violence offenses reported in 2020. That is something that we get from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. That's the latest results that we got was from 2020. But something to keep in mind is the word reported. We know for a fact that most domestic violence incidences go unreported. And we also know that since 2020, we had a pandemic. So we know that those numbers are higher, but that's the last reported incidences that we have. Who can DV happen to and who can abuse? It is across all religions, races, ethnicities, genders, sexual orientations, and ages, as well as all socioeconomic and educational levels. It's always surprising the people that still think that it's a certain education level, or it's just poor people, or just a certain race that is affected by domestic violence, but it literally is across the gamut. It's anyone and everyone is affected by domestic violence. Domestic violence can happen between current and former intimate partners, but it also includes any other family member or household relationship. Um, Something else to keep in mind that if there's two people that have a child together, they're considered intimate partners, even if they've never lived in a household. If someone comes in and they have a child with somebody and whether they've lived with somebody or they're not, that is considered an intimate partner, and therefore we can help them. They are a domestic violence survivor. So a little bit about domestic violence, the power and control part of it. It's basically a feeling of superiority. It's constantly making a victim feel inferior. Domestic violence is not an anger or substance use problem. Those things do make it worse, but it is not the reason that domestic violence happens. And very quickly, I want to show you the power and will. I'm not going to go through all of these. I've gone through some of these in previous presentations, but I want to touch on some of them because the reason this is so important, we use this at the center to not only for our survivors, but also friends and family of survivors because of the confusion as to what domestic violence is. The power and control will is almost like a toolbox that abusers use. These are the different ways that they try to maintain power and control over their victims. There's, of course, intimidation, making somebody afraid of them using looks. We had a survivor that came in that um, every time she left the house, her abuser would take a picture of his gun and text it to her, remind her what time to be home. There's isolation when someone controls where you go, who you see, limits all outside involvement. There's, of course, emotional abuse, putting someone down, making them feel bad about themselves, calling them names, minimizing and denying and blaming. This is huge. You've heard the term gaslighting. That happens a lot, making the survivor think that they're crazy or it's not that big of a deal, or actually even blaming them for the abuse. There's using children. This is the one I want to point out since we are talking about DV and children. We had a survivor that came in who she grew up in a household where her mother was abused by her father, and he still got custody, visitation rights as they were fighting for custody. And of course, he would use, that opportunity to send messages back, intimidating messages, that type of thing. And of course, she was 8 years old at the time, and she would go back to her mom and she would never say anything. And as it got closer to the divorce being final, her father started taking her and her sister, who was 6, to a graveyard and would show them the plot that he had bought for their mother, and insisted that they go back and tell their mother. And this is such a horrific story. And I asked the survivor if I could please use it in some of my presentations because I think it's so important to understand what an abuser will go to, the lengths they'll go to in order to try to maintain power and control over their victims, even using their children, even terrorizing their children. Those two little girls carried that trauma around for a long time. So that's how abusers will use children. There's also economic abuse. 97% of survivors that are going through some other type of abuse are also going through economical abuse. The bottom line is if I control the purse strings, then you can't leave me. Using privilege, treating someone like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like the head of household, and of course, coercion and threats. Threatening to kill threatening to kill family members, your pets, threatening to commit suicide. Those are all forms of coercion and threat. So just to give you a quick, uh, I guess, just overall look at what the ways that an abuser tries to maintain power and control over a survivor. So very quickly, child abuse and neglect. It's any willful act or series of acts of commission or omission by a parent, caregiver, another person in a custodial role that results in any physical, mental, or emotional harm, potential harm, or threat of harm to a child. And it is 100% a preventable act. There's no reason that a child should be abused or neglected. I want to show a quick video real quick, and then we'll chat a little bit about it. Again, there's some triggering content. This is very sensitive, so just wanted to give you warning before we watch it.
Ellen, if we're supposed to be able to hear this, we cannot.
Yes, you cannot.
We cannot. No.
Um,
If you pause the video and you stop your screen share and you go back to screen share again,
mm-hmm.
the window that pops up, there will be a small little toggle on the bottom left that asks
Okay.
you if you want to share sound.
Okay.
You just go ahead and
You're like my built-in
select
IT
yes.
department.
I've been doing Zoom meetings for a while now.
All right, hold on one second. So I apologize, everyone. Give me a sec. Hmm. And it's under share.
Yep. So you just go to share screen
Okay.
and there should be a
Share
little,
sound. I
there you
apologize. There it
go.
is. I see it. All righty. Wow. Okay. All right. I'm back. Go back to start. Can you hear it now?
Yes.
It's talking to the police, Mommy! Stop it! Stop it! My baby! Stop it! Could you come to the police, please?
Okay, we're gonna be there. What's going on?
They're having a fight because this has been going on forever and ever. Oh my God!
What's the matter? Hello?
Okay. That's a heavy one, isn't it? Um, and the reason I show it, and it still upsets me every time I watch it, but is because I think it's important for folks to understand that young lady. I actually had to go and find out what happened to her because the first time I ever saw that video, it was quite disturbing to me. She actually grew up and she's a DV advocate in San Diego. She's okay, her brother's okay, her mom's okay. It took about 3 or 4 more times for her mother to finally leave. But the reason that I showed that video is because that child herself was never abused, never abused. She was never physically abused, sexually abused, but she was in a household where that was going on. That kind of abuse, watching her parent um, being abused, obviously causes trauma in that child's life. So that's why, as disturbing as that video still is to me, I think it's important to watch because it gives such an understanding of the trauma that a child, it's just living in domestic violence, goes through. In fact, 1 in 15 children are exposed to IPV, intimate partner violence, each year, and up to 90% were eyewitnesses to the violence. That's an upward of 5 to 10 million children. Children exposed to violence in the home are 15 times more likely to be physically and sexually assaulted than the national average. And children were home in 63% of the intimate partner homicides, while 43% witnessed their parents being murdered. Domestic violence is also the leading cause of homelessness in mothers and children, something I don't have to tell you. And how many of you, and I can't see all your screens, have heard of adverse childhood experiences? I'm sure through some of your studies or some of your classes or trainings or whatever, you've heard of ACEs. This is something that has actually been around for quite a long time, but we're just now starting to really, well, not the DV world, but um, more and more of the medical industry, mental health is starting to realize the importance of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, how they work and how they affect children and into your adulthood. So I'm going to show you guys another quick, domestic violence obviously is an ACE. And I want to show you also another quick video explaining it. If you aren't familiar with what ACEs are, this is a really awesome video, kind of just breaks it down why they're important, why DV centers are paying attention to them, mental health advocates are paying attention to them. So I want to show you real quick.
A child's experiences early in life are important building blocks for the developing brain. Genes, nature, are like the blueprint. They provide the basic framework for brain development. However, genes do not design the brain completely. Environmental influences, nurture, fine-tune how the brain works by shaping which brain connections get used. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent, whereas ones that do not get much use fade away. Together, genes and the environment build the foundation for all future development. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships early in life lead to healthy development. But children's brains capture other experiences as well. Stressful events. However, not all stress is bad. Positive stress involves normal childhood experiences, like starting daycare or meeting a new person for the first time. This stress is essential for healthy development because it helps children develop coping skills and confidence. But when stress is frequent, chronic, and uncontrolled, it is toxic to children, especially when they do not have a caregiver to provide support or buffer the stress. Adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, such as abuse, neglect, exposure to intimate partner violence, parental depression or addiction, and poverty, are toxic stressors which could lead to lifelong changes in learning and behavior. ACEs early in development can impact social, emotional, and cognitive functioning, increased risk-taking behavior such as drinking and substance use, and increased risk of disease, disability, and social problems later in life. The question is, how do adverse childhood experiences impact a lifelong development? One of the most important systems in our body is our stress system. It's activated when we experience stress. We become alert, our heart rate increases, and so do our stress hormone levels, cortisol and adrenaline. Our body is ready to react, what is known as fight or flight. A short period of time after the stress is over, or if a child receives support from a caregiver, the stress response turns off and the body returns to a normal state. Adverse childhood experiences create stress responses that stay active, and without the support of a caregiver, the system has difficulty shutting off completely. This constant and prolonged activation can affect immune system functioning and increase the chances of sickness, infection, and disease. Prolonged activation of stress hormones is also toxic to the brain. Certain areas of the brain are more vulnerable to toxic stress, including the executive center or the brain's control center, an area important for solving complex problems, attention, reasoning, impulsivity, inhibition, and learning. A second area is the emotional center, the brain's alarm system, which is involved in processing and interpreting emotions and the ability to control impulses. The third area is the memory and learning center, the brain's filing cabinet, which plays a major role in learning and the formation and retrieval of memories. Science shows that adverse childhood experiences impact all of these brain centers. Behaviorally, what we begin to see is emotional distress, poor emotion regulation, greater impulsivity, learning difficulties, and physical and mental health problems. More recently, science has begun to look at how ACEs cause changes in gene expression through a process called epigenetics, which helps us understand how nature and nurture interact. Epigenetics causes changes in the way genes work without changing the DNA code itself. This occurs through chemical changes influencing how the code is used. In other words, genes are like the hardware in a computer. They determine the boundaries of what is possible. However, we need an operating system to tell the hardware what to do. Epigenetics is like the operating system directing the function of a gene's DNA hardware. The genes we are born with are the genes that we have for life, but experiences like nutrition, exercise, smoking, stressors, and relationships all affect our biology. Adverse childhood experiences are associated with epigenetic changes related to stress, brain development, cognition, and systems associated with mental and physical health. Changes that happen early in brain development are more likely to be enduring and are possibly passed on to future generations as well. The good news is that positive, supportive relationships at any stage in life can make a difference. However, supporting families and children early on will help prevent many of these negative outcomes. One of the key ingredients for healthy development is having warm, loving, and actively engaged caregivers. This involves promoting serve and return interactions, where caregivers actively and warmly engage with the child, making eye contact, responding to sounds, words, gestures, emotional needs, and sharing experiences like reading and play. Providing programs that support caregivers to strengthen these abilities are the blocks that build healthy foundations for life.
Okay. So as we said before, and as the video talked about, there are a few things that we contribute that we call ACEs. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. There's of course neglect, physical or emotional neglect, and household dysfunction can be an ACE as well. An adverse childhood experience. If there's someone in the family with mental illness, if there's someone in the family that's been incarcerated, has gone to prison, if your mother has been treated violently, if there's substance abuse, and even divorce. Um, so these are things that we are starting to, again, look at and understand the effects. Again, um, having a mother that's treated violently, um, and emotional and physical neglect when there's abuse going on in the home, is some of the things that we're looking at, how domestic violence affects children. So prenatal exposure to domestic violence is the physical effects of domestic violence can start even when they're a fetus in their mother's womb. When a woman is stressed while pregnant, it can actually result in low infant birth weights and premature births. Infant exposure to domestic violence can result in low birth weight. A baby may be inconsolable and irritable. They have a lack of responsiveness. They lack an emotional or physical attachment to their mother. They could have developmental delays. They have excessive diarrhea from both trauma and stress. And a lot of people still believe that, oh, they were a baby, so they don't have any memory of it, or they were a baby, and so it doesn't affect them the same way. But the truth is, infants are most affected by the environment of abuse because their brains haven't fully developed yet. Um, this is something that I was kind of blown away when I read that, and something too that I want to share with you because it's important that I recognize the fact that this could be other stuff too, especially when I'm talking to the medical industry. You know, they're looking at this stuff, but this doesn't only mean DV. Well, of course not. It could mean of a lot of things. But I think the reason it's important to point out these things that this could be exposure to DV because it makes us think outside the box when we're dealing with children that may be exposed to DV. You know, it might be something else, but now that we know that this could be exposure to domestic violence, it's something our antennas can go up and we can maybe think outside the box and think, what's going on inside that household? Impact of exposure to DV on young children. They could have an exaggerated startle response. They could have somatic complaints where they always have a tummy ache or a headache. Regression in toileting or language. Kids that are potty trained may resort back to going back to needing a diaper or a pull-up. Um, they've even gone as far as kids that speak, full sentences will go back to baby talk. They have sleep disturbances. They start showing aggression. They have difficulty with concentration. They have difficulty attaching to caregiver. They're hypervigilant about things. They have separation anxiety. This is when eating disorders can start, whether it's loss of appetite or even overeating, because food becomes almost like a comfort or a crutch. And of course, PTSD can also be an impact of exposure to domestic violence. And the impact on older children and teens, antisocial behavior. They start doing badly in school. They have impulsive or reckless behavior. They've started maybe abusing drugs or alcohol. They're starting to run away from the home. They have involvement in violent or abusive dating relationships. Maybe they have fallen into being an abuser, or in some cases, they've fallen into being a survivor because it's what they know. Depression, anxiety, and of course, withdrawal. Now, having a 14, almost 15-year-old, um, these are a lot of things that are already teenagers anyway. Kind of withdrawing to their room. They start, their friends become more important, that kind of thing. The things that you have to keep an eye on is when they start hurting themselves. You start seeing impulsive or reckless behavior. You start seeing them abusing substances. Um, the depression, anxiety, and withdrawal is something we have to keep a super close eye on as well. So there's three types of stress, and they talked a little bit about it in the video. The American Academy of Pediatrics tells us there's three unique types of stress that a human can experience. There's positive, tolerable, and toxic. Positive stress is usually short in duration. It's usually encouraged by a safe and supportive environment, and it's a normal, essential part of brain development. That could be something like the first day of school, or going on a job interview, or even the first day of starting a new job. Those are all short in duration. You may be a little stressed out, but they're positive things. And it is part of just things that not only but adults and children, it's just a normal essential part of brain development. And then there's tolerable stress. This is when your body goes into fight, flight, or freeze. It's fully engaged in response to a threat. It's typically very brief, and it's usually time limited. And it also is supported by a caring adult relationship during childhood. I had a presenter once use uh, the example of a snake. You're walking along and you see a snake. Some people will try to fight it. Some people may run, and some people just freeze in their tracks. It's very brief, it's very time limited, but that's that tolerable stress. It's something where you're fully engaged in response to a threat. And then there's toxic stress. This is in a long and severe duration of stress. This is when a child is in a constant state of flight or fight. They have little control over the environment, and they have little control over what's happening to them. And it occurs in the absence of a healthy supportive relationship with a caregiver. And this is what we see, this toxic stress that domestic violence brings into the life of a child. This is the toxic stress that we're talking about that can have that long-term effect on children into adulthood. Very quickly, some short-term effects on children in preschool. There could be, they could start bedwetting, increase crying or whining. They have difficulty falling and staying asleep. They have signs of terror. They start stuttering, or they're hiding, or they're scared of everything. And they have signs of severe separation anxiety. School-age children, they feel guilty. They somehow think that their fault. They blame themselves. This is when low self-esteem starts kicking in. You can start maybe seeing lower grades, not doing well in school. They start getting in trouble more often. Again, with the headaches and the stomachs, they seem to always be going to the nurse's station because something doesn't feel good. I think this is so important again, and I think more and more in this day and age, we're realizing that just because a kid is bad in school doesn't mean that they're a bad kid. There's usually something else going on, and I think this is a really good list of kind of seeing when they get in trouble more often in lower grades, what else is going on with that child. It's not because they're not bad because they're necessarily a bad child. There's usually something else going on. And here's some short-term effects for teenagers. Again, the guilt, they somehow blame themselves. Um, they have low self-esteem. They start skipping school. They start starting fights. They're angry all the time. They're aggressive. And of course, they're withdrawn. And some long-term effects for really all of them. Depression, anxiety, PTSD. They can have physical health problems. We've seen that. Substance abuse, fear. They have this lingering fear of everything. And of course, adult DV, as I said before, they sometimes become the perpetrators or the survivors. So really quickly, and probably some of this stuff you've been told or have seen before, but just impact of child trauma. Um, Something that we just are more and more becoming more aware of, how it affects a child, their cognitive state, physical health, their emotions, their relationships, whether they're current or even future relationships, their mental health, and all of these things we basically got over in our previous list, how they behave, and of course we know even their brain development. So these are all impacts of childhood trauma. So how to help? This is a sticky situation, depending on what role you're playing in that child's life, whether you are working with the parent, they're a client, or it's even someone you might know, or just somebody that you're observing. Um, build trust and safety with the child, listen and observe. Our job is always to be a safe adult for them. If you're in a situation where you know that a child is in a home where there's domestic violence going on, believe them. Ask questions. How are they? Is everything okay at home? I'm always here for you if you need me. I think just validating, I think as human beings, we all want to be heard, we all want to be validated, but it's even more important for a child that's in a situation where there's trauma going on, where there's some kind of violence going on, to be listened to and to be heard. Make sure they know this is not their fault. It is never their fault. Violence is never okay, and it is definitely not their job to fix it. Encourage them to stay out of the violence. Don't try to be the hero. It's not their job or responsibility to prevent or to change the situation. And unfortunately, we see this a lot where children will try to protect especially their mother, sometimes their father, but especially their mother. They'll get involved. They can sometimes get hurt. And we've even seen situations where the perpetrator has been hurt because now you're dealing maybe with a teenager and the teenager gets involved and somebody gets hurt in the mix. And sometimes it's the child and sometimes it's the perpetrator. So um, always encourage them to stay out of the violence. Find a safe place to hide. If they have a neighbor or family member that they can go, if they have to hide under the bed, if they have to go in a closet, just try to get yourself out of the situation and be sure and bring younger, especially younger siblings with you, if you at all can. But at the best you can, try to get yourself out of the situation by finding a safe place to hide. Also, something that's really important, if you happen to have a relationship or speaking with the parent, don't make the surviving parent feel worse. It's not helpful, it's hurtful, it doesn't make anything better. And trust me, that parent knows that what they're putting their children through is not healthy and not good. So making a surviving parent feel bad about maybe what they're putting their children through or what they're exposing their children through does not help the situation. Just try to be there for that survivor. Figure out a way to get them resources to try to help them so they can in turn, it empowers them to get themselves and their children out of that situation. So safety planning for children is hard, but the easiest way is to teach children who they can contact if an emergency arises. Obviously, they should learn how to call 911. Do they know how to reach out to a friend, a neighbor, an aunt, and uncle, somebody that they can reach out to? See if they can maybe think about, you know, a plan where they could go if things begin to escalate. Using a code word for them sometimes can help so they know which adult to trust. And if they're old enough, have them keep their cell phone on them at all times, in some cases hidden, depending on, again, the situation. And again, this is touchy because you are dealing with children. And you just, I think this is a list of certain things that they've said, okay, this is what we should, try to give the resource, try to help a child fund resources. But I think the bottom line is even if you just get a child thinking about it, if you've had a conversation with a child, if you've talked to them, talked about who they would contact, where they would go, that kind of thing. I think, maybe not having a definite plan because you can't always, but at least have them think about it and understand that to get themselves out of that situation if they can. So something to remember, why doesn't the survivor just leave and take their children with them? They can't just leave. Leaving an abuser is the most dangerous time for a victim of domestic violence. The loss of power and control can trigger lethal action. When a abuser thinks they have no control, that's when it becomes deadly. In fact, some studies indicate that leaving can increase the chances of being killed by 75%. I know you see it on the news or read about it on, internet or newspapers or wherever of someone being killed after they've gotten out of the relationship. It's a very dangerous time. And there's also financial reasons sometimes. There's family ties. Um, a lot of times the abuser will threaten to take their children. And so they're scared because if they don't have financial means to even leave, how are they going to fight the abuser to keep their kids? So um, eh, eh, just keep that in mind when dealing with the survivor, that it's not always easy for them, and maybe they, like as I said before, putting a safety plan together for a child is one thing. Maybe that survivor, maybe that parent needs help developing an escape plan as well. Always focus on safety when you're dealing with children. Make them understand that they deserve to feel safe. They make them know that domestic violence, domestic abuse is against the law. Violence is never normal. It's never okay. And they're not alone. There's other people that are going through what they're going through. And again, I think it all goes back to, boils down to validation, listening, being there for somebody. So when to call the police? Um, Obviously, if you see something going on, the police are the most effective way to help a victim and their children. You can call Child Protective Services if you know that there is abuse going on. There's a number right there, and I'm sure you guys are aware of it as well. But don't call the police unless you know there's immediate danger. And the reason we say that is because a lot of times, first of all, the survivor may not be very happy that you did so because sometimes it could make things worse. If you know there's violence actively occurring, if you see or hear physical, abuse happening, call 911. But more importantly, teach your children how to call 911. Make sure that they know what that 911 is for, to get help if they're in danger. And you can also text 911 now too. I don't know how many of you knew that. I just learned that last year that you can actually text 911 too. But it's important that if you choose to call the police, just understand that there could be some pushback from the survivor, but also make sure that the child knows how to call 911 as well, to get themselves out of danger. So I know you have heard of Child Protective Services. We work very closely with them. Um, the goal of Florida's child protection system is to ensure children's safety. We want to keep them safe from abuse, neglect, abandonment. But they do everything we can to keep families together. The CPI is tasked with determining the safety of the child based on present or impending danger, what the vulnerabilities of the child might be, and is the parent or the caregiver, are they in a capacity to keep the child safe, to protect that child. They do remove the child from the home if they believe they are in danger, but that is not their number one goal. Um, and it's something that it's sometimes a hard call to make, but obviously, if you know that a child's in danger, being abused, is being exposed to something, get child protection services involved. Um, and I've had some people say, well, I don't know. Go with your gut. I'm a firm believer that if you feel like there's something going on that is harming that child, your instincts are probably right. And I would err on the getting child protection services involved and letting them determine it than you not to follow your gut feeling, to not follow your instincts. In the state of Florida, we are all mandatory reporters. Again, something I know you guys already know. We are professionally mandated reporters. We are legally obligated to report known abuse, and we also must identify ourselves when reporting. And that is for children or vulnerable adults. Unfortunately, we can't reach out to get help for domestic violence survivors. They have to be the ones to do that. But for children or vulnerable adults, we are required to report it. And just in case you don't have it, I want to make sure that you do have Child Protective Services, a phone number, if you feel like there is a child that might be in danger, 1-800-96-ABUSE. And how can CASA help? I'm going to go quickly just over some of our programs that we have. Peacemakers, and this is the one that does pertain to our kids and the kids that are affected by domestic violence. The first thing we have is we have a 5-week curriculum that we put together with Pinellas County School Board. And basically we go into elementary, middle, and high schools, and we try to teach children what a healthy relationship looks like, how to regulate your emotions, those type of things, because we are trying to prevent future abusers and future survivors. Another program that Peacemakers has, we call Camp Hope, and that is 1 week out of the summer. We have children from 7 to 11, I think, that come and they spend the night. And it's a week of just coming and being a kid. And these are children that have been exposed to domestic violence, to trauma. And they come and they work with counselors and they get to be with other kids that are their age and have been through a lot of the things that they've been through. And it's just really an amazing program, and we're very proud of it. So that's something that our peacemakers do. We also have adult education, which is what I do, training webinars, that kind of thing. Of course, our emergency hotline, for those of you that don't know, we do have a 24-hour hotline. Advocates are available 24/7, 365 days a year. They do help with safety training, safety planning. They talk to survivors about what their risks are, what their needs are. They can call just to get some support, to find out what their rights are, the resources that are available to them. And I also encourage people, even if you're not a survivor, if you love a survivor, if you know a survivor, if you want to have a conversation with a survivor but not sure how to do it, call and talk to someone, call and talk to our advocate, and find out how you can help a survivor too, because we want to make sure that a survivor gets any kind of resource or support that they can. And a lot of times it's just someone calling and saying, this is what's going on, how can I help them? And an advocate will be able to help you. We also have our emergency shelter. This is obviously where someone would come when home isn't safe. Majority of the folks that come in do have children. So I would say our shelter is probably 50% children, most people that come in. The shelter is open to everyone, though. Let me make that clear. It is clear, open to single people, but it's also open to people of LGBTQIA plus community, to men, to anybody who wants to come in. We will make it work for you. We will make it happen. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. The shelter provides emergency clothing and food, personal care items. We also have economic empowerment programs. We have justice advocacy. And something I'm very proud of is we have an on-site and off-site pet kennel that's available. Um, not very many of shelters have a kennel, but it's very important for us to make sure that the survivor knows if they need to leave, that they can take whatever family member they need to take, and that includes their dog, their cat. We've had parrots, we've had a rabbit. So we will definitely bring, we don't want any reason for you to have to stay in an abusive relationship. We also have an emergency program called Injunction for Protection Attorney Program, and this is basically anybody that comes in can get can talk to somebody about getting an injunction for protection, and that is for domestic violence, that's for stalking, that's for sexual violence. It is at no charge. Anybody can come and talk to an attorney. We help them fill out the necessary paperwork. We help them understand the importance of what they need to fill out, how much they need to fill out. The paperwork is quite daunting. The space for filling out what happened to you is this big. So it's important that survivors know exactly what to put down and what a judge wants to see and those kind of things. So that's a program we're very, very proud of, is our Injunction for Protection Attorney program. We also have restorative programs. We have case management. We have childhood advocacy, DV advocates. And that is whether you live in one of our shelters, one of our residents, or even if you don't. If you want to come to the Family Justice Center and you are in one of our programs, counseling, you're just trying to see what resources are available. We can provide advocacy for you, case managers, really any service or resource that a survivor needs, we will provide. A little bit about our housing. We do offer permanent supportive housing. It does have to be DV-related disability, but they can stay as long as they need to. There is CASA, a CASA staff on site. And you do get case management. So if there are people there to help you, even if you're at our permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, again, you do get support group, case management, and then rapid rehousing. And that's actually the one that is used the most. Rapid rehousing, you may have somewhere to go. You just may not have the means to get it done. You may need first and last month's rent, or you may need to have your electricity turned on, those kind of things. So that's the program that is used the most, is our rapid rehousing program. In October, I don't know how many of you, excuse me, have heard of the Family Justice Center, but we opened in October of 2022. We're very proud of the Family Justice Center. We're the only one in the state of Florida. There's 47 of them in the country. And for lack of better words, it's a one-stop shop for survivors. And what that means is that in the past, a survivor, once they leave their abusive relationship, now they have to go find the policeman and file a report, or they have to find an attorney, or they've got to make all of these arrangements trying to get their life back together. And sometimes it would take weeks, even months, in order to do that. And it takes up to 7 times for a survivor to leave their abuser. And the reason why is because the system was set up for the abuser and not the survivor. And what the Family Justice Center has tried to do is we've tried to make the support that we give a place where they come in one place. If you want to talk to an officer, we'll go get someone down the hall for you to talk to. If you want to talk to an attorney, let me go get an attorney for you to talk to. And all this is done. Your children can go to our children's center and hang out while you get done what you need to do. We know that it works. We saw the Family Justice Center contributed to 90% drop in domestic violence homicides in the city of San Diego the first 2 years it was open. So we know that it works. And we are very proud of the success that we've had and the survival rates that we've had of folks coming in. Just give you an idea, here's some of our FGC community partners. I'm sure you know of these. You know all about these. And very quickly, if you want to get involved, We are always interested in volunteers. We are always looking for folks that want to help with direct or indirect advocacy for our special events, our special projects. I don't know how many of you know about our thrift store. We have a fabulous thrift store. We're very proud of it. The thing we love about the thrift store is 100% of the proceeds. Everything that we sell in the thrift store goes to our survivors. Um, it does not pay a light bill. It does not pay a salary. And what's so good about that money, as you guys know as well as I do, it's not attached to a grant. It's not, it's not a certain list or criteria we have to follow. If we need to buy a gas card for a survivor, that's kind of where that money comes from. So we're very proud of the success of Community Thrift Store we have with the store to help our survivors. Um, and of course, donations. We always welcome monetary donations, but something else that I want to make all of you aware is we do unused items for direct survivor use. As I said, those folks that come to shelter, sometimes they come into shelter with nothing but the clothes on their back. And so that's why we provide emergency clothing, resources, toiletries, those kind of things. So we're always very happy to take unused items for direct survivor use. Our thrift store, we love donations of our lightly used items so we can sell them in the store. So I'm at the end of my presentation. I have a little QR code for you to click on if you so wish. If you have any questions, if you have any feedback, if you anything that you any comments you want to make about the presentation. If there's something else you'd like to see, I wish she had talked more about this or whatever the case may be, we always value your feedback. I'll leave that up for a second just in case anybody wants to give me a grade. And then, of course, now we are open to questions. And let me open this up. So, get this open. Oh, and here we go. There we go. Now I got you back. Hello. I apologize that I am so technically challenged. Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Swift. You're muted. No, there you are. I hear you now. Go ahead.
Hi, so by way of introduction, I am currently the acting CEO of the HOA and will soon be the interim CEO after Daisy. So very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Excellent. So wonderful presentation. That was awesome. I kind of have a question about therapeutic, how we can help past childhood trauma, PTSD survivors on getting the help in adults so they can have better relationships. And what are some of the what does the science say about how victims of childhood trauma can get better, for lack of a better term?
Well, obviously, getting people, caregivers that care about the children is what's important. I mean, anybody that's in that child's life that you feel like, there's been teachers, there's been coaches. The issue with domestic violence and children is because we're still dealing with the adult. Until a child is actually abused, a child is being exposed to domestic violence, but unless they're being abused or neglected, there's that slippery slope of how we can help them. Obviously, we want to get the parents involved. We want the parents to, understand the importance of why they need to leave the relationship, not only for themselves, but for their children. But CASA does have resources. So if a survivor were to come to CASA or reach out to CASA, we do have programs that are set up that can help those children of domestic violence. Really, the only thing that we can do is strongly suggest that if we're starting to see signs that there's some issues with that child, is to strongly suggest that the parent maybe try to find some resources, some counseling, that type of thing. It's nothing we can force. It's nothing we can push unless we know for sure that there's some type of abuse. And then, of course, we have to get Child Protective Services involved.
I'm sorry, I think I asked a poor question.
Okay.
I meant some of the research that you showed about
Oh,
teenagers who had suffered childhood trauma earlier in life what does
Yes.
the science say about overcoming that? If we recognize this teenager or young adult is having a difficult time in their relationships because of their trauma and
Hmm.
trauma, what are what does the research say, or what resources do they have about overcoming it to experience better relationships, to overcome the childhood trauma for the IPV that they
Okay.
suffer?
Oh,
Does
yeah, I
that
heard you
make
better this
any
time. I
sense?
apologize. Okay.
I think I asked.
I'm going to be really honest. I don't know the research of it. Do we know that ACEs can be overcome? Absolutely. Do we know scientifically, do we know that full disclosure, there's 10 ACEs. I grew up with 9 of them. So can you overcome them? Can you get the help that you need to live a life that, a good life, a better life, a life that you don't have health issues, or you're not an abuser? Of course, we definitely know that it can help. The younger that you can help somebody, obviously, the better. Um, you know, I think the biggest thing that we can do, as with anything, is spreading the word and making people know, make sure people realize what ACEs are. I think the biggest realization for me was understanding that infants and babies, I think we were always taught, most of us were, well, he was a baby. There was no memory. They don't know. They don't understand. They didn't realize what was going on. And now we realize that is a huge, huge impact on infants because of the development of their brain, the trauma that they're hearing, that they're seeing, that the stress from their mother or father that's going through whatever trauma that they're going through. So I think just, obviously educating ourselves, but as far as statistics, I don't have them on that, but I do know without a doubt that you can um, survive ACEs no matter how many you have. And I will give you guys, if you want to write it down, there's Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. She was the Surgeon General, I think, for the state of California. She's brilliant. And she is kind of one of the um, experts on ACEs and the effect that it's had on children, and the um, the I'm trying to think of what word I'm looking for. I've lost it. What we're looking to do to help those kids that are suffering with ACEs. She's kind of an expert. Her name is Nadine Burke Harris, and she's brilliant. And there's lots of videos out there. I think um, uh, she's got probably about 6 or 7 videos talking more in depth about ACEs and finding out more about how they affect and the help that you can get for kids. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. That's a great answer, and thank you for sharing that testimony.
Thank you. Oh, I see 2 more messages. Is there questions, or does anybody want to just ask? Oh, there it is. Yay, thank you.
Um, I am not seeing any other questions in the chat right now, Ellen. We do have another minute. Does anybody have another question for Ellen? No? Ellen, if somebody does have a question after today, is it okay if they reach out to you?
Of course, absolutely,
Wonderful.
always. If you guys want to put my email address in the chat, if you have any questions, and if I don't have the answer, then I will find the answer. I will find someone who can get me the answer, and I will make sure that I can get that to you. Absolutely. Um,
Wonderful.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Whatever questions you may have. And then a lot of times you'll remember, oh, I wish I'd asked her that. You think about it after the fact. So please be sure and reach out to me if you have any questions about any of this. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. And for everybody who was in attendance, Megan will, in the coming days, send out a copy of this recording, and that will include that link that Megan put in the chat for Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, as well as the link to view this recording. So that will be coming in the following days. If you need anything, please reach out. Ellen's information is in the chat right now as well. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for the work that you do. And Ellen, once again, thank you so much for leading an
Thank
informative,
you for having
engaging
me.
training.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for having me. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.